right, it's too early for this, but I don't care. I'm doing it anyway. The 2025 MVP odds for the WNBA are out on some betting sites, including FanDuel. Here is what they look like on FanDuel right now for 2025. Asia Wilson, the favorite at plus 195. Caitlin Clark, second at plus 220. And then there's a group behind them, Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, neck and neck at plus 600 and plus 650, but that's a decent gap between them and the top two right there. Collier, I feel a little bad for it because she's had this breakout season. She's had a breakout playoffs, and still you see her down the chart. We'll see what happens with the rest of the WNBA finals, depending on where she can rise there, because she's just a terrific all-around player. Unbelievable on defense, the way she can bounce from the perimeter back to the basket. And, she's so smooth offensively, just an awesome basketball player. I don't think she puts up the volume stats necessarily. You also saw Sabrina Ionescu at fifth, who didn't have a good game in game one and had some odd comments after, too. She said, if the Lynx don't have if they didn't have our attention before, they have it now. I don't think she meant it the way it came across. But nevertheless, Asia Wilson, number one, and Caitlin Clark, number two. If I had to bet right now, I would bet on Caitlin. Big surprise to some of you, right? But Asia won't have that groundswell that she had going into this year, which was basically she must be proclaimed the number one MVP candidate, unanimous MVP before games are even played. Now, that doesn't mean she won't win it, because she's certainly good enough to win it. She won it on merit, aside from, the discourse. But she also took a lot of shots this year. I wonder if the volume comes down at all, depending on how the Aces adjust, what their roster looks like. But mainly, Caitlin Clark hopefully won't have to pay that rookie penance tax anymore. Look, there's clearly some in the WNBA space who are just going to hate on her no matter what. Like, there's nothing she can do because she's so popular. They're going to hate on her. But you have to imagine at least the idea of her having to prove herself to people who approach this in good faith as voters is going to be gone. And Clark started the season rough. I mean, I don't even say rough. She didn't start the season as well as she finished it because the Fever played 11 games in 20 days to start the year. After the Olympic break, you could make the argument she was the best player in the WNBA. I think, to me, there's a clear top four. It is Asia, Nafisa, Caitlin, and Stewie. Those are the four best players in the league. That can mix and match probably as seasons go along, depending on where people are age-wise, the kind of year somebody's having. Like Stewart had a down year this year, and there's not really reason to believe she's going to trend up, right? But there is reason to believe that Clark is going to trend up. What we saw from Caitlin last year should be the worst version of her we ever see, and she still produced more points than any player in the history of the league. She still dished out more assists than any player in the history of the league. She still scored 20-something points a game after the Olympic break. So I think if you take her Olympic break, post-Olympic break numbers, assume that the Fever will be over 500 with roster improvements, and assume that she makes some improvements, turnovers come down a little bit, maybe, three-point shooting percentage comes up a little bit, it's going to be tough for her not to be the MVP. Producing like that, if she does. Now, maybe Asia has a similar season to the one she had this year, but generally, we talk about a season being, generational or unprecedented because it doesn't happen year after year after year. Is Wilson likely to score 1,000 points next year? Probably not. That doesn't mean she can't. She's certainly capable of it, and maybe, with the motivation of losing, she comes back on fire. But I could also, again, make the case for Nafisa as the defending champs. If they were to win this series, they got a long way to go to do that. The Liberty really need to win this series. I know I'm talking about the finals now, but, I was there last night, so it's on the brain. The Liberty really need to win that series because they have a super team. When you take Stewie and Sabrina and add Febich with John Cole Jones, that's four bona fide star level players, I think, that the Liberty have. So they really need to win that. And that also makes it hard for their players in any MVP conversation because they cannibalize each other. When you see Stewart in that top 5 and Sabrina in that top 5, that's not really the case with the other players involved here on the list. But I imagine over the course of the offseason, not only is Caitlin Clark going to put in the work to get better, refine that floater a little bit, refine that mid-range a little bit, work with her teammates a little bit more, hopefully have a little bit more of a talented team next year beyond, the Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull, the rest of that roster. But I imagine that the WNBA will be better prepared for next season, for everything that comes along. I just don't know if anybody, the media, the WNBA, was quite prepared. Maybe they should have been. Maybe they thought it was going to be a flash in the pan. Maybe that's why they stacked the schedule early in the season this year to maximize the revenue at the beginning. I don't know. But it just, from the way people talked about it to the way that it wasn't promoted at times, to the way that I noticed a difference in even the way the FIBA approached things post-Olympic break. I'm not sure that the league was ready for just how explosive Caitlin Clark's presence would be. With a whole offseason, which is a long offseason to get ready, I think you'll see media companies more prepared, and I think you will see the WNBA more prepared. Now, does that have anything to do with the MVP? It should, in a sense, because Caitlin's accomplishments shouldn't be discredited because people resent the fact that she's the biggest thing in the league. Because she came in last year with all that hype, and it's fair enough that people said you had to prove it at the pro level. That's fair enough. That happens in every sport. But then she did. And once she did, people still tried to do mental gymnastics to figure out a way to not admit what was true, which was that she was the best guard in the WNBA and the best point guard season in the history of the league in her rookie season. So just assuming she makes an improvement from year 1 to year 2, it doesn't even have to be big, but if she improves off what she did at the end of last season, I think she has a clear case as the best player in the league and thus the MVP. And with maybe some of the natural skepticism and natural scrutiny removed, and hopefully some of the made up BS removed, I think, the odds look good to me. I don't have any issue with how the odds are set, but getting plus odds on Caitlin Clark for MVP next season, it's a pretty good bet, in my estimation.